So do I need to hit continue? Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, okay, yeah, and we'll put this on
Okay.
YouTube in the morning. Jill has this posted.
Oh,
So
that'll be fun. I
yeah,
better be careful what I say, right?
yeah, it's fun. We welcome everybody as we're starting to load our group. Fun to see people from all around the country, some familiar faces. Gina Bridgman, great to see you as always. Carl and Candy, it wouldn't be a book club without the Spears. I also see that we have Bethany and Shane from the Hamlet of Big Fork, and Gary Shea. I believe you and Greg worked together in Lake McDonald, right back in the day.
We did.
Yeah,
Back in the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, Steve Raymond is on the call too. He worked with us.
That's awesome.
Hi, Gary.
Hi, Greg.
Hi, Gary.
So we'll take a minute here to get what is a good large group tonight. Welcome back to Book Club. We're super excited to start our fall campaign here in the book club. Last 4 book clubs of the year, but do not worry. We'll be back at it in 2022, and I'm obviously really interested in people's ideas about what kind of books you might want to have. I can tell you in advance that Norman MacLean's son, John MacLean, who has a best-selling memoir called Home Waters, has agreed to join us at the Glacier Book Club next year. I'm very honored by that. And next month's book club is going to be very, very important. It's Dr. Carolyn Finney from Middlebury College has written a really important book called Black Faces, White Spaces, about the challenge we have in creating diversity, equity, and inclusion in our national parks. So don't miss that one. But tonight we are just really honored to have Terry Kennedy. Terry, thanks so much for joining us from your home in Bozeman tonight. Really appreciate your taking the time to be with us.
Oh, thanks a lot, Doug. I'm just very happy to be here. It should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, we picked tonight, Terry. When you and I started talking about this, we picked tonight very intentionally because September 15th, as people who have been reading your book know, if they were watching the dates, that September 15th is a special day in the pantheon of your experience at Mount Cleveland.
Yeah, definitely is. I had to go back and do the math on that too, but I think on September 15th, we were actually, that was the day we started out. And then we finished the next day on the 16th. Yep. And I think Saya was right in there too on the 15th. And it was just the way it worked out. And,
yeah.
And even the West Face of St. Nick was probably about that same time too.
And that was 6.5-ish years after the disaster, the Mount right. Cleveland tragedy, and you and Jim and Steve met in Waterton, and began that climb. You described that a little bit in your book, but talk to us a little bit about how you guys came to that decision to do that.
Well, I was always going to do it one way or the other, and I always tried to entice Jim into it, and he always kind of shrugged it off, but I couldn't help but think that he'd always be interested. So Steve and I were going to go by ourselves, which might have turned out to be, less successful. But and I put this in the book too. We were ready to go. We were about 3 days away from heading up to Waterton, and my brother took a phone call and wrote a note to me. And I came back after a bicycle ride or something, and there was this note that said, Jim Kanzler called. He said, the face looks great. Meet you in 3 days. And I guess we met in Waterton. Might have met in St. Mary, but I think we met in Waterton. And then, rallied and put it all together. And Jim had just come back from climbing all summer in the Canadian Rockies. And it had been a terrible summer in the Rockies. They hardly got up anything, just from one storm after another. So he was really, chawing at the bit to go do something. And so that's how it started. We had one false start. We walked all the way to the base, and the cloud cover was about a third of the way down the face. As I think I described that in the book, and we decided, no, we better not. We were going to head to the desert. We were going to go to Utah as we walked out from there, but we missed the boat ride to get back. So we just thought, well, we'd wasted a day, so we just spent a night in the shelter, the goat hunt hiker shelter, still there. and got up the next morning. It was nice. And, we took it from there. We went in there and just came off kind of like clockwork.
Yeah, it's an incredible book. We're really privileged at the Conservancy to be able to, we've had the book in the stores. We're really looking forward to the next edition coming out, because we've found a rekindling of interest in this story this year, and in part because of the book club, and in part because I think as people have, as you know, been rediscovering our public places in COVID as a place to go and find peace and joy. They're really interested in these stories. So I really appreciate such a great crowd coming tonight to share time with you. I'm Doug Mitchell. I did not introduce myself. I have the privilege of being the executive director of the Glacier Conservancy. I'm joined tonight. My partners in crime tonight will be Sean O'Leary from Butte America, who is one of my coworkers who will help arrange for book plates and those kinds of things, and Jill Bridgman, who always helps with the questions. We really encourage people, just unmute yourself and ask a question. Terry's super accessible guy, and also just use the chat if you have a question. And we'd love for this to be a storytelling time. If you have a story about a climb that you had, Terry would love to hear it. This is a two-way conversation tonight, where we get time to share with each other about this place that we hold so dear. I generally, with authors, I'll look up a bio so that I can get an independent kind of view of this. And when I looked up Terry Kennedy, I got 3 Terry Kennedys. The first one was a skateboarder. The second one was a wealthy spy, and the third one was a poet. So I just think we should conflate all of those tonight and just attribute all that to Columbia, the pride of Columbia Falls, Terry Kennedy. But Terry, you grew up in Columbia Falls. You cut your teeth here in Glacier as a really young kid. Went off to MSU. You say and talk about in the book how you came to climbing, but you really did that at quite a young age.
Yeah, it was. But I find that a lot of climbers got started in their teens, in my generation too. And so it's not all that unique, but to be from such a little town like that, and I don't know, it seemed like we were pretty young. We were self-taught. I think it's what really made us seem young then too. We didn't have gyms or experts with classes. That came a little bit later, but it was self-taught with clothesline ropes and that sort of thing. So yeah, and it was really fantastic growing up in Columbia Falls. I thought the rest of the world must have been like that, but I began to understand it was not.
Yeah, you learn that pretty quickly when you get out into the world. But we're privileged in Montana to have a lot of great climbing, which you've been able also to travel to other places. You talk about some of those other places in Montana, those other special places. Do you have a favorite among those that you continue to go back to?
Well, of course, the humbugs are always kind of sacred, in a way, but and the other places are less accessible. The humbugs are not alpine, they're subalpine. They're kind of forested area, but it's a little magic land, kind of like City of Rocks or something similar to that, maybe. But I like all the mountains. I've spent some time in the bridges because there's some accessible limestone in there, and try to get into the Beartooth. This, lately I haven't done any big projects there, but Diane and I get out and go to what we call tundra trudging up there on the plateaus, which is a lot of fun. So the Beartooths are very important too. Yeah, in Montana.
Yeah. So Sean O'Leary, I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot. Sean joined us recently from, as I said, Butte America. And Sean, you've spent a lot of time in the Beartooths as well, and kind of had a goal of a Beartooth goal. Tell us a little bit about that.
I read an article about a couple guys. They were in their late 60s that hiked to all 330 mountain lakes in the Beartooths.
Oh my goodness.
They just finished this separately in the last couple of years, but they hiked to, I think, 250 of them together, and then stopped hiking over the 2016 election, both on either side of the spectrum. But the Beartooths are definitely a special place to me. Glacier up there as well. But yeah, the Beartooths are definitely something else.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, we plied Sean away from the Beartooth for a while, so we sent him to the Grinnell and Cracker this last weekend. So we're getting him acclimated.
Yeah, that's good.
So Terry, you start climbing when you're roughly 15 years old,
Yeah,
right? You're in your mid 30s now. So
yeah, thank you.
you know, how do you feel in your profession has been as a physical therapist, right? How do you feel like the climbing has impacted you kind of in your daily life, how you've gone about life as a person?
Well, it's a good question, but I just have to say that I think about it all the time. I mean, climbing. I mean, I look back at certain years and I think, let's see, what climbs did I do that year? And I can reference the rest of my life by that, which is kind of interesting. So it's always there. And I found that, just as a physical therapist, learning some tools of the trade there actually helped my climbing. And, as being a technical rock climber and going into the gym and then going out at the crags too, I did some of those concepts. So there's a little dovetailing in there.
So your story covered, your book covers a lot more than just the Mount Cleveland 5. It really is a bigger story. Tell us a little bit, what's the one story that didn't make it into the book?
There actually are several. One of the things that comes to mind right off the bat was a couple of friends of mine, climbing partners, who one of them lives in Bozeman still, made the first winter ascent of the north face of Granite Peak in 1972 to 73. And I mentioned it, I think, in the foreword, but it was originally a chapter of the book. There were actually 5 chapters that got taken out of the book just because it was getting too long. And I was advised that it would be better to do that. You could still get from the front of the story to the end of the story without these 5 chapters. But so Doug McCarty and Brian Leo, who were in that 18 to 22 year bracket, went up to climb Granite Peak in the winter, and they wound up climbing the north face. And they were caught by a fast moving Arctic front a couple hundred feet below the top. And they were committed to do that. And that I was just very privileged to get to climb with those 2 guys. When Jim Kanzler wrote me about that, I said, man, I got to get to Bozeman. I want to climb with these guys. And that whole story got left out of the book. And there were a couple others.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. So
that was, I think it's still the biggest thing that probably ever happened in Montana in terms of a mountaineering near miss adventure.
Yeah. So the other thing that's interesting too, is so much to talk about. And again, folks, feel free to use the chat to ask some questions directly to Terry, or if you have stories, please launch or just say you've got one, and we'll get to you. But one of the things hard not to be taken by is the change in technology and gear, right?
Yes.
Chenard is famous for saying there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad gear. And just in your lifetime, talk to us a little bit about those gear changes that you've seen, and do those change the nature of the climbing?
Yeah, there've been a lot of changes, a lot of technological changes, and I think they've made a big difference. A couple of things that I think were probably very huge in changes was the advent of the cell phone, where you could get instantaneous weather reports. You just didn't have to look up at the sky and think, well, I hope it's going to be good the next 3 days. And off you go. You can look at that and you can decide whether it's a good time to go or not. I think that was huge. Probably is for a lot of climbers, alpinists especially these days. Everything's gotten lighter. The boots have gotten lighter. The gear has gotten lighter. In fact, I have behind me here a table full of pitons. If you want to look at them, just show you, kind of the change and the weight of the gear, because pitons are made out of chromoly steel and they're heavy. And you can probably get 3 or 4 pieces of gear for the same amount of weight as you could in the piton days. Let me just grab those.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So kind of back in the 60s, maybe even back in the Royal Robbins and the first ascents of the big walls in Yosemite, these are soft iron pitons. This is a ring piton. You still see these things fixed on routes, especially in the Tetons, as Greg has probably encountered them. And this is a soft iron blade type piton. You can see it's bent. And there are some advantages to that. Now, if you fix them, they all bend around cracks and stay put, where the chromoly, such as this Schnard angle, is so hard that it actually makes a hole in the crack. And that's what was making all the pin scars in Yosemite, just changing the nature of the climbs incredibly. But these are heavy. Here's about a 3/4 inch angle. I guess while I'm on the piton thing, here are some of the blade pitons. I don't know how well this is coming through. These are
That's perfect right there.
knife
Yeah.
blades. And Jim and I carried these a lot. We took a lot of long, thin pins on the glacier climbs because there's a lot of thin horizontal cracks. And his dad even knew that. Hal Kanzler said, long, thin pins in glacier. And he was absolutely right. The nice thing about these are called knife blades or bugaboo blades. These are the longer ones. It's a thinner one. They come even thinner. I've got one here. I can't juggle, so I'm gonna have to. Oh, one fell on the floor. It was the knife blade, and that's probably less than 1/8 of an inch. And we used a lot of these, and they're fairly secure when driven all the way in. This piton is pretty secure, especially in a horizontal crack. And so that's kind of the difference. But these bugaboo blades that I'm trying to juggle here, they all nest real well on a carabiner. You can get 3 or 4 of them on a carabiner, where some of these other pitons, 2 to a carabiner was a crowd. So in a nutshell, all this iron, here's what, 6 or 7 pieces here. I mean, you could probably carry 10 or 12 pieces on your rack that had, that are probably more versatile. So here are the Camelots. There's a lot of versions of these active camming devices. You retract the cams, put them in a crack, and let go of them. The springs bring them back to the crack. And the design, when you pull out on them, they lock. These camming devices won't reverse, hopefully, ideally, and they'll just tighten up in the crack. And so this is way more versatile. Yeah, thank you. So they come in a whole variety of sizes, from 1/2 inch up to 4 inches is typically what you carry, but they come bigger than that too.
Well, that's a game changer to change the
It
weight
is.
of things that you're having to carry as
Yeah.
you're trying to be nimble on the side of a rock face.
Sometimes pitons take 2 hands, and a lot of the modern gear will take 1 hand. So that's really helped advance the level of difficulty. And the other thing, I'm not sure if I mentioned this, were climbing gyms. You can really get strong in a climbing gym, but then you get out on a real rock. It's a different ball game, but you're strong.
Right. No, that's for sure. So you referenced Greg, and I think by Greg Olson, and Greg, I'll kind of put you on the spot a little bit. When we were talking a bit before we launched during our tech check, you were indicating that when you worked in the park, you may have been one of the last people on Cleveland before the group, the tragic group went out.
Yeah, that's right, Doug. Steve Raymond, who's on this call, also, we were there in early fall of, I guess, what would have been 1969. Yeah, and it's funny you show all the pitons and stuff. I've got a whole drawer full and a closet full of the same kind of gear.
Yeah.
It's funny. Well, we did, some of those kinds of climbs, but it was really interesting and very sobering then when we found out about the tragedy on Mount Cleveland just a couple of months later. The climb that they were doing was far more ambitious than what we did, but yeah, they were really something. Those guys were goers. They were legendary.
They were goers.
Yeah.
You mean they were going for it. They were going for all the big stuff. It's too bad they died before their time, as it were. But who knows where they would have gone with that? Pagriba and Jim Anderson too, I think, was really strong. And I just, in researching this, I thought Jim Anderson was really strong. He did Cleveland in '69 also. He did the west face of Cleveland twice before that tragedy. Once with his brother and once with another real renowned guy. So I think he was really strong, and I can say it because I've seen some of the pictures, a lot of the Anderson pictures that came off, that were recovered off of Mount Cleveland, and he and Jerry Kansler went way up that couloir and on the north face to reconnoiter it. There's a picture that Jim Anderson took of Jerry Kansler looking down at it. It's really quite underexposed. And then you can see the other three guys down on the apron down there, but they went up there and checked that out and came down, and I think they were two really strong individuals at 18.
Yeah, really, they were really impressive, and they were kind of climbers before their time, I think.
That's
Right.
exactly right.
Yeah, they're
So I-
really, really impressive climbers. I love your stories about the way you started out, because I know Steve and I share the same kind of background, kind of teaching yourself as you go, and starting with the clothesline rope and the,
Yeah.
you know, not taking any formal courses, but reading Mountaineering, Freedom of the Hills, and doing your best to follow what the book says. And,
Oh, I mean,
yeah.
Freedom of the Hills was huge,
Yeah.
as were the catalogs for REI.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
You'd have to look at the catalog and think, I think this is how this is used. You
Yeah,
know,
exactly.
you
They
know,
had some big old heavy boots, and yeah,
Steel shank, Galibiers,
Yeah.
you know, yeah.
you
You
bet.
know, I've got 9 chats here, and I'm not sure what to do with this, Doug. Do I-
Yeah,
do I-
so Jill will help us work through that in
Okay.
just a minute. I was
All
just going to ask before we do that, we're talking about, you know, these guys potentially being a big deal and names in climbing, you know, it seems as if today with free solo, you know, everybody knows Alex Honnold.
Yeah.
You know, that climbing has really become kind of quite a, pardon my phrase, but kind of a sexy sport where it was more of a geek pastime, right, in the 70s.
Hey.
And it must be interesting for you to kind of watch that. I mean, how do you see that as a generational climber who went about it the old-fashioned way to now this generation of YouTube climbers?
Yeah, you know, that's really good perspective on that. And I think probably one of the easiest ways to frame it was, you know, when I went to Yosemite in 1975, and a lot of the people I'd come back to, you know, were just, you know, it was a geek sport kind of a thing. And they said, wow, what can you imagine? What would be the hardest climb? And I flippantly said, well, probably when it'll get to 515. And I really didn't believe that, but it has. And well, what would be the ultimate climb? I said, climbing El Cap without a rope. And I didn't really believe that either. But when Alex Honnold came along, I'd have to say that athleticism has really grown a lot. And it is an entirely different flavor. But where else would it go but harder and faster and lighter and all the rest of it? Climbing gyms have helped. You know, I hate to admit it, but I think sport climbing's helped because somebody explained to me, I was kind of, you know, negative about sport climbing when it came up. They said, that's how we're going to get better. And it was true. But right now, sport climbing, people go up and what we call hang dog on it. You know, they say we did this route or that route, but you hung on 4 bolts or something. It's like, but that you keep rehearsing that to do those moves, and then you kind of have that athleticism and then apply it. In terms of Alex Honnold, I mean, it's out of this world. I mean, I'm just flabbergasted by that. I don't know how many times I've watched that. But watching him do that just brought tears to my eyes when, you know, he did it, not because I was afraid for him. It was just like, wow, it's gone that far. You know, I was just amazed. One caveat though, is they went up there and rehearsed those hard pitches, and they don't keep that a secret. You can see that in the movie, but they had rehearsed them until they were wired. But still, when you walk the tightrope without the net, then it's like, it definitely is still for real.
Yeah, if somebody told you back in 1971 that you could do that for a profession, you'd have been all in.
Oh, well, probably so. You know, I think, I'm not sure. You know, I got kind of stuck in my own genre, you know, but which is probably a good thing. But
well, Jill, we've got a bunch of good questions that have been populating in the chat. So I could talk to Terry all night long, and but I know that there are a bunch of great questions, and let's get to them.
Yeah, thanks everyone for sending in your questions, and feel free to keep chiming in. I'll just start at the top and kind of go down the list. So Carl and Candy talked to someone who lived here when the tragedy happened. So this guy they spoke to said it was possible that the group disappeared to avoid the draft before they were found. Have you heard this rumor, Terry?
Oh, of course they did. It was in the newspapers, I think, even, or something like that. But it's absolutely false that they did that. I mean, they were in Canada and they had to come back into the US. You know, if they were trying to avoid the draft, why would you come back into the US? They actually flew down Mokawanis River, past Glens Lake, and all the way out that way with the helicopter. No sign of any, foot activity on there. So, but there is a reason to question that too, because Ray Martin had been drafted. I mean, his draft number was up. I mean, when he got back from Cleveland, he was in the Army. He was probably out to Vietnam.
Wow.
And he comes from kind of a military family. He's got not his dad, but his uncle's in the military. And I think they were all thought, wow, Ray's going to be a soldier. And there's another friend whose name I won't mention that was of that era, a good friend of Ray Martin's. And Ray said, there is no way I'm going to go. He said, they'll have to kill me before I go over there and kill somebody else. So there was that discrepancy in there. But I spoke with his friend directly, and he definitely brought that up right away. So who knows? But they did not. Yeah.
Interesting. Bethany and Shane recently watched the summit about the 2008 loss of several climbers on K2, and Gear McDonald, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but Gear McDonald was recorded saying that everyone has an innate love of climbing, that it's the first thing that a baby wants to do. So they just thought that was interesting. Do you have any thoughts about that, or think that
I
there's
have
some
to
truth to that?
agree. Yeah, I have to agree. I mean, kids are grabbing curtains and just trying to stand up or crawl up. But yeah, I think people do have an innate, we're natural climbers. We think of goats being able to climb the sheer faces and stuff, but I don't think goats do 5'10" or anything, even close to that. However, I climbed the east face of going to the sun one time, and I had a goat ahead of me, and he just, I was going as fast as I could. I was soloing, and man, he just got a couple thousand feet on me very quickly. So in that kind of climbing, we aren't the best climbers necessarily.
Yeah.
Grizzly bears are also very good climbers, as it turns out, but probably not 5'10" or 5'7", but
sure.
Yeah, anyway.
Bronwyn thanks you for coming to join us tonight and talk about your book. They're curious about what was going through your mind and your heart while you were high on the mountain. Youth is impetuous. Did you ever think, what have I gotten into?
Oh yeah, more than once, many times. And I think that's highlighted good in that ice climbing thing called the 70 centimeter fall. That's kind of what goes through. It's like, man, if I get out of this, I'm never going to do this again. But it didn't turn out that way. But usually when you're in climbs, when you're really dialed, you are just dialed in on what's immediately ahead of you, and occasionally you look up to to look at the next section, and that when it's really working, you're really focused. And going back to Alex Honhole, he had to be extremely focused.
Sure.
He probably didn't even think about what was below him.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, does that same kind of focus stay there when you're sleeping, while you're hanging over like a tall sheer cliff? That was another question. Just what's it like sleeping up there,
Yeah, well, on all the Glacier Park climbs, we slept on ledges because it's not monolithic. I have slept in hammocks on walls in Yosemite, but and that's, that gets your attention. But in Glacier, and on walls in Yosemite or something like that, you're always tied in. You're always tied into anchors.
Yeah.
So intellectually, you can't come off.
Yeah.
But it still is a little queasy. At least it was for me, especially on the wall stuff in the hammocks. I always like to have the inside position.
Eric had a question. He says, this may be a truly naive question, but do the pythons that you were showing earlier, do those stay in the rock after the climb? And how does that affect the rock in the long term?
pitons, actually.
Oh,
One
sorry.
question I have, can I look at everybody? Do I click view up there and I can see everybody at once so I know who's asking the question? Is that possible?
Yeah, if you just
I click view?
view and then gallery, it should show you
Gallery.
everyone in little tiles.
Oh, there we go. All right, good. Yeah, little tiles. So the pitons, no, on the climbs like in Glacier, et cetera, you reuse them because you need them above, just like you would with the other gear today, like the active cams or the, the nuts, chocks. So you're always trying to recover them. And I remember on Saya one time, I got a friend stuck, one of the passive cams, and Kanzler's miffed at me getting it stuck basically. And he spent a half an hour and he virtually blew out the side of the rock with his rock hammer to get it out because he thought we might need it above. So, that was a good example on how you take them with you. A lot of times on sport type climbs or shorter rock climbs, you might fix pitons intentionally because it might be a good crack there and you don't want to drill a bolt, which is admirable in my opinion. So sometimes you're intentionally left and sometimes you can't get them out. So you just have to move on and they stay in there. And either somebody gets them out or they're still up there.
Sure. Apologies for my mispronunciation. Non-existent climber here, obviously.
That's okay. So can I see who's asking the question? I'm not sure I have this right. I know there's quite a few people and there's some people that don't have
Yeah,
pictures.
so that would be Eric from Cincinnati.
Oh, wow, cool. How are the Bengals doing? I do what you ask. Okay. So anyway, I can't quite get that far down. I've got about 4 or 5 rows here, but
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you go to
Can
the,
you
you
click
can
on them
go
and
to
they'll
the next
conquer?
page with an arrow on the right-hand side.
next page, arrow right-hand side. There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can't get everybody on all once, right?
Mhm.
No,
Yeah, we
correct.
got a big group.
You're too
Yeah,
popular,
okay.
Terry.
All right, well, go ahead and fire the next question and I'll
Sounds
do it
good.
again.
Okay, sounds good. Susan King just had a lovely comment. She loved the book. Her husband did a lot of technical climbing during the 70s through the early 90s, and he did a lot of climbing with Rainier mountaineering and summited Rainier many times and also climbed the Matterhorn. So she mentioned your book helped me understand how you climb with a team and how the protection moves with you. So she just thanked you for that. And he died last year after reading your book, she went out and checked out his climbing rack, and it looks like his gear was like a lot of that older gear that you were showing.
That was a golden age for me too. I mean, the learning curve was steep and, things like Cleveland and Cy, you weren't sure if you could do them, but now of course you can. And so that, to me, that was a golden age. And so many guys in my generation, in my genre, say the same thing. It's like, wow, it was just, it was a different ball game. And it was just, really high adventure. And, there wasn't anybody else to rescue you oftentimes. Now if you go out and have trouble in a rock climbing area, other climbers will come to your aid and help you out and stuff. But, and they did back then too, but there's just less of it.
Sue might enjoy seeing the Jerry's pack that you have.
Yeah. All right. So I do have some relics that came off of Mount Cleveland, and I might have to back up to get it all in here. But here's Jerry Kanzler's pack. I put some clothes and stuff in there. This is a Caramore pack. This is canvas. This is leather. This is felt, and it was a state of the art in the 60s. It was a British pack. And I think, I found this in Jean Kanzler's garage when I was helping her transition with Jim into assisted living. And I recognized it instantly. So on this particular one, it comes off, but the straps in the back were avulsed off the back of the pack, and one shoulder strap is completely missing, just pulled out and busted off right there. And this part of it was gone. And some of this, I'm not sure if it was trauma or maybe rodents chewing on it, while it was up on the mountain for 6 months and probably eventually got exposed. And, the mice probably had a field day with it. But it was kind of the state of the art pack. And on the copy of the book that you have, either kind of the so-called second edition, kind of a little upgrade, and then the original one, which probably a lot of you have too. That's Jerry Kenza on the cover, by the way, and he is wearing that pack. And that photo was probably taken in October 1969 in the Humbugs, or on the way into Humbugs. And it was a long process to get him photoshopped off of there and in front of Mount Cleveland. And the picture of Mount Cleveland there was taken on the way in 1976, probably September 15th, actually. And so anyway, that there's a few other things that.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Probably looks familiar to Susan from her late husband's collection, and to many of us of a certain age. So
Caramore, yeah. So anyway.
Very
that's
cool.
great.
Janet Brandt is wondering, do many climbers also have an interest in caving or splunking? Are the skills of one applicable to the other?
I would say probably there are some. I haven't been too interested in it, but some of the skills are about the same. I mean, in terms of ascending fixed ropes and descending fixed ropes in caving. So that there's a similarity there. I know some of the climbers I bumped into, especially back in the day in the 70s, were spelunkers too, but that hasn't been an interest of mine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Going more for the views, not the darkness.
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah. Or something.
Marianne Myers just commented she loves watching climbs on TV. It's amazing and she's addicted. She likes to hike. She's done most at Glacier over 20 years, and she sticks to riding Cutting Horse. So another fellow non-climber, but hiker.
But you have an appreciation for it, and probably everybody's seen Free Solo by now, which is definitely top end. I don't think anybody's racing back up there to Free Solo at all those. You know, there are climbers that are getting pretty close to that, simul climbing and, you know, doing El Cap in 2 hours or something. And
sure. Yeah.
But that, you know, again, that's been rehearsed many times. You know, it's like, you know, it isn't like they just drive into the valley and go, oh, El Cap, I think we can do it in 2 hours. That doesn't happen. So anyway.
Well, they can rehearse it because they're professionals. That's their job.
Oh yeah, it is. And they train like Olympic athletes, you know,
Right.
They are Olympic athletes. And
you had a weekend off from school, and that way in a very narrow window, and no climbing gym, and you know, so
it was really hard to train for Cleveland and Saya because I had so few climbing partners, you know, and no rock gyms. But we did chin ups by the zillions, you know, and stayed strong that way, but it still isn't climbing. Yeah.
Sure. Stephen Raymond is wondering, Terry, how many times have you climbed St. Nick?
Oh, let's see. I think 4.
Okay, nice.
Yeah. Yeah, including the West Face, which was my favorite. You know, that really didn't make it much into the book, just a brief mention of it, but that was one of my all-time favorites, is West Face of St. Nick in '74, Steve Jackson. And yeah, that was a hoot. And St. Nick actually is about the best rock in Glacier. I just want to throw that in there. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, it's good.
Heard it here.
Yeah, you should go do it if you're so inclined. Yeah.
I've seen it. I don't know about that.
Gorgeous peak.
It is gorgeous. Yeah. Marianne mentioned, I did climb Mount St. Helen after the explosion, but that was tame.
Yeah, that's very good. I climbed it before the explosion.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and this is in the book, so people will probably recall this. I was out there climbing St. Helens with the mountaineers, and I didn't know anybody on there. You know, there were 30 people all roped together and just got plugged into the rope and chugged your way up there, which was great. I just thought it was neat. And there were a couple of, you know, probably professor types up there in the group that said, yeah, you know, of all the volcanoes in the Cascades, St. Helens is the most likely one to erupt. And lo and behold, I think it was probably, would have been 8 or 9 years later, kablooey, off it went. And so that was pretty spectacular, actually. I actually have original watercolor by D. Molinar. Some people might know who D. Molinar was. And of Mount St. Helens before it erupted, of course. So just a little
Wow.
aside there.
Yeah.
It's a gorgeous, it was a gorgeous peak, still is, I guess, in its own right.
Mhm,
When I
sure.
think if memory serves, you have a section in the book where you're climbing around the time of the explosion
Yes,
and you get grit on your gear.
yes, that did happen. I was working on a route in Gallatin Canyon that was one of the few buttresses that face the river, which it's a very cool place to climb these buttresses. Some of them you can reach, with your arms at the bottom and also at the top. They're that narrow. But anyway, one of the last ones to go was this one we were working on. And, I was leading and I was drilling a couple of bolts on lead, hand drilling bolts on lead, which is a lot of work. And it seemed to me we had 3 bolts and only 2 hangers. And I got to a point where I thought, this just has to take another bolt. So I lowered off. There were 4 of us. And while I was drilling the bolts, they'd tie me off to a tree, then go exploring. And I'd holler to them when I had the bolt in, and clip it, and they'd come back, put me on belag, and off it'd go. I was tied into a tree, so I wasn't going to fall anywhere or, very far. And so we went back down, and I think it was that night or that day, maybe while we were actually climbing it, St. Helens went off. And we had all this fallout. So when we went back to finish the route, we had to blow dust off the holds. And so the name of the route became Ashes of Stone. And so that's in the guidebooks and the Ashes of Stone area. So it took on a name. So it's a remembrance of St. Helens and the explosion.
Inside knowledge, that's good. We can use that.
Yeah.
This is great. We got about 15 minutes or so. We'd like to be respectful of everybody's time. We
Okay,
got
you
some
guys.
great questions
Try to
we've
be-
got. And again, thank you, Terry, for spending your evening with us tonight. Terry has also been generous enough to agree to sign book plates. So if anybody would like a book plate, Sean is in charge of book plates. So if you would just email Sean@glacier.org, then he'll take care of making sure that you get a book plate, Sean@glacier.org, and we'll send these out to Terry. He'll sign these and we'll send them out to you, and you can get those in your books. In addition, the picture behind me, Terry sent me earlier today. I believe you took this, you said in 2016 of Mount Cleveland.
Yeah, that would be right. That's on the Northwest Ridge, and somewhere up in there is where the Mount Cleveland 5 came out of their base camp onto the Northwest Ridge, probably a little further up the hill, I'm guessing, and then went around onto the west face. That's a good way to climb the west face, is to gain that from Waterton Valley, but yes.
Yeah, and Terry would like each of you to have this photo, so I will get it out to everybody as well. So back to you, Jill.
Yeah, it's a beautiful photo. I love it. Well, before we go on with more questions for Terry and the book specifically, a couple people are wondering, what is your cute little cat's name behind you there?
Yeah, Lucy, she just appeared back there. When I get on the computer, she'll come up and visit. Yeah,
Lucy, the cat. I love it.
Lucy Lou.
Photobomb.
Does she stay in the house or does she go on climbing trips with you?
Well, she doesn't like to ride in the car, but we had a cat that used to like to ride in the car that we had previously. But no, Lucy doesn't like the car, but we live on an acre of land in kind of a big subdivision here, and she's an intrepid hunter, and she's outside.
That's awesome. Well,
Mostly
hello.
nice bulls. Yeah.
Carl and Candy Spear had another question for you. What are your thoughts about Mount Everest being so crowded now? And sometimes you see the video shots with like trash everywhere.
Oh
Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, it's disheartening. I suppose it's inevitable though. And climbing Everest, yeah, you have to be in good shape. But I did Alma de Blanc. That was fixed mostly. A guided route just to get over there. And it's just ascending to fix her out with a nice view.
Yeah.
And all that. It's just my opportunity to go do something like Everest, to do Everest, came and went a long time ago. It's like, nah, not going up there with it like that.
Yeah.
So in my next life, maybe. Yeah.
Sure. Tom, he signed in as his wife, Sue Eagle Point. He asked, are you going to address the rescue and recovery efforts headed up by Rangers Bob Frosson and Larry Fieser, among others?
There were a lot of people involved in that, and McKay Jenkins chronicled that very well. Let me hold up his book. So here's what it looks like. Whoops, there we go. Is that right side up to you? It's backwards to me. Do you guys
Yeah.
see that? It's,
Oh yeah, flip
It's
it
upside
again.
down.
It was,
no, it's upside down. No wonder.
yeah, there you go.
It's still backwards. But it's called White Death, McKay Jenkins, and he did a superb job in chronicling the whole, initial concern that they were overdue to the recovery of the bodies, which, covered 6 months. It was a great international effort because a lot of the expertise came from Waterton. And I'm glad to ask this question. I hope I don't get too long-winded on this, but the Canadians in the Rockies had assembled some really good experts for mountain rescue because their peaks are on the average bigger, trickier, and more widespread, and a lot of interest from around the world of climbing. And they got all these guys like Fieser and Furman, and I couldn't get everybody's name on that right, but if you could order the report. And actually in McKay's book, he mentions all these guys. I mean, they're all in his book. But there's a book out called Guardians of the Peaks, which is written by 2 Canadian people. Their names are Kathy Calvert and Dale Portman. I mean, we can get the details of that to you earlier, but they devoted a lot, several pages, maybe 4 or 5 pages to the Cleveland Rescue. And they had just assembled this team. There are rescuers from Canada that came from Banff, from Jasper and Revelstoke, all got involved that were on the hill, came to the mountain. And it was probably, I'm framing it this way. I went back and looked at it a while later. They didn't quite say this, but it was probably one of the greatest international efforts of a rescue anytime, anywhere. I mean, from that standpoint, it's history. It's yeah. So anyway, so those guys, there were a lot of people up there. It involved a lot of personnel. Yep.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for touching on that. Gina Bridgman, my lovely mother-in-law, had a question. She mentioned it sounds like technology has made climbing a lot safer, but has it taken any of the thrill or excitement out of it?
It is safer if you're clipping bolts. Bolts rarely come out. If you're on the sharp end on something like Glacier Park Mountains, there's one rule in that type of climbing, and that is the leader must not fall. So falls, even with protection, could be very serious or fatal. So in that respect, but you can always drive yourself to the level to where you're about to fall off. And you can do that with bolts on good rock. You can fall off and hang dog, as we call it. So, but you can also get stronger, and you can, increase your technical level of difficulties. So, but you can always get yourself freaked out. I do it every time I go out.
And Carrie is wondering, how much do you climb now, and what might make you stop climbing?
Well, actually I've tried to quit over the last 50 years once or twice, but was unsuccessful. I'm having a pretty good rock climbing season this year, more than last year. A couple of years ago, I had both my hips replaced, so that shut me down for a little while, and it's been kind of slow, coming back into that. Got a lot of tight musculature, but climbing actually seems to help it. And I finally just went, I'm just going to go do what I can do, and getting out there doing, high steps has really helped that aspect of it. So, I'm trying to do more and more as time goes on, but enjoy it at maybe a little lower level. I don't have to feel like I have to go out there, pushing the envelopes at this point.
Sure. We're getting toward the end of our questions. Did anyone else have additional questions, or would you like to chime in? Feel free to unmute yourselves and take the time to ask questions for Terry.
I see a great big dog down there.
Marianne's been visited. Yeah.
Yeah, I got another question. Do you use like a satellite phone or a Garmin unit for emergency situations?
Sure.
On your backcountry hikes and climbs, do you take like a Garmin?
Right.
Yes.
Short answer is no. The longer answer is I probably should do that.
Oh.
Yeah, Terry, this is Greg. I just want to comment on your north face of Said climb. That was absolutely epic. I mean, when you read your account of it, it's an amazing climb, what you guys did. Two guys going up that 4,000, almost 4,000 foot pace. I don't know if it's been climbed since. It probably hasn't. But the question I have is, well, given the nature of the rock in Glacier Park, doing direct aid kind of climbing is challenging, to say the least. It sounded like a lot of the moves that you had to make were under aid conditions, direct aid conditions. What fraction of that climb was using direct aid, and do you think it'll ever go free?
Well, the short answer, it has gone free.
Oh, it has. Okay.
More than
There you go.
once. But it was with modern approach, which, we've kind of touched on before, and I think just having good weather forecasts and realizing you can do it in a day. There's an old saying, if you load for bear, you're going to wind up hunting bear. And so there's a tipping point in there where we had to be self-sufficient, couldn't count on the weather forecast, and then had steel shank boots, etc. We were going to go slow. We were prepared for bivouacs. And once you say we're going to be prepared for bivouacs and water is going to be an issue, then you're loaded for bear and you wind up hunting bear. Now you can go with rock climbing shoes, the same thing you climb, the same thing Alex Honnold is wearing on El Cap. Much, I guess you'd say, easier to climb. I mean, it is easier to climb. It's lighter, faster, and all the rest of it. And so, but we're climbing with that thing. Is like, if we get hit with a storm, we better be prepared, and which I talked about in the book, of course. And so, so the leader was even climbing with a pack, a lighter pack. And, but now the guys that have done it now have done it. The leader doesn't take a pack, and he's got all these quick, pieces of gear to put in, and they're very good climbers. There's no doubt about it. Athletically, they're way out there. But they can get the job done. It's been climbed in 11 hours. But one guy had already done, he's the only one guy to do it twice. I think his last name is Woods. I think his first name is Dan, and I think he's from Whitefish. And he and another guy, he did two ascents, and the second one was basically a new route parallel to ours. And but they went very fast, and once he realized, like, I think we can do it without a bivouac. You throw that out, you throw the stove out, you get the good weather forecast, you climb with light gear, and then you simul climb some of it where you plug in gear and you both climb together and the lower guy's taking it out on the top. It's a shortcut, but that's how you get those kind of things done. That's how El Cap gets done in a few hours.
Yeah, it's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, it is amazing to me too, yeah.
We got a couple of questions, Jill, that snuck in right before the buzzer.
Yeah. Becca from our team asks, is there anything in Glacier that you still want to climb or maybe wish you had climbed?
Yeah, of course, the whole bucket list. But and one of my good climbing partners and I, climbed recently together, and we thought, man, 6 pitches whipped us, 20 pitches, would kill us. And so, that window is probably slowly closing, or probably has closed, but so you'd have to take smaller objectives, but I don't think I'd ever go jump on side again. It'd be, it would be just fooling myself. Yeah.
Mary Pat asked, do people use drones to map out routes ever?
I bet they do. I haven't. I think drones have followed some really fabulous ascents, like the North Face of the Eiger, which was done in a few hours. And I think it probably had either drone or helicopters, but I think probably it does happen. I certainly don't. I wouldn't even know how to operate a drone.
And Bronwyn was wondering, I'm sure other people would love to see it again too. Could you show the pack again just before we kind of start wrapping up?
Yeah.
I'd love another look at it just to see the.
Here's the pack. So it's canvas, leather, steel that rusts, and felt. And it was the state of the art in the 60s, for an alpine pack. This may be trauma, could be, rodent chewing,
You
but.
lifted up a little,
Oh, sorry. Yeah, and I might have to step back a little. I was, so, so one shoulder strap is completely missing of it, just ripped off at the bottom and torn off here. So that speaks to the tumultuous event that being swept 3,000 feet down the mountain results in. And then the lid was probably a vaults off its moorings down there. This is a British pack of Caramore, which was really state of the art, just prior to my day.
And if you had that full of all your gear, do you know roughly how much that would weigh
Well,
approximately?
it's hard to say, honestly, I've been privy to Jim Anderson's photos that got success, that survived in the camera. And those guys, I think, were traveling pretty light. And they may have bivouacked on the west face. So, the weight they may have had in there once they had their gear out, it's hard to say, anywhere from 15 to 25 to 30 pounds. In the winter, probably more, because if you bivouac, you have to carry more.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why they call the pack carry more.
I just happen to have a modern pack sitting right next to me.
Oh, good.
Think about the contrast, right? So,
Yeah.
here you have today's pack, which is just a little bit, and you can, and it probably weighs
really.
6 ounces.
I mean, the pack itself weighs quite a bit. Yeah. I mean, the older ones especially. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thanks for showing that again. That's just
absolutely.
a great visual.
Yeah. Oh, good.
Yeah.
That's terrific.
Well, if one other visual real quick, remember in chapter 3, talking about finding the chalk, this is it. So if you remember that part of the book, this is that chalk's own nut. And it's a British thing. And it was before nuts really came in. It was a new thing. The Brits used to put machine nuts, hexagonal machine nuts through rope or webbing and jam those in the crack. That's how nuts or chalks came about. And this was the middle of the 60s. It's pretty random. It's made by a company called Clog. There's the red tape on the bottom of it, as I described, and the blue tape fell off. I wore this as kind of an amulet for a while until the tape fell off, and I thought, I can't do that anymore. But this particular nut showed up in a guidebook written by Bill Dawkins and Tom Calicay called Bozeman Area Rock Climbs. Very good book, very well done. Had a 1968 picture of Jim Kanzler on a rock called a Mother's Day, and that was on his rack. So it was definitely came off the Kanzler rack. And I think it probably belonged to Jerry. I don't know how I could find it in this good of conditions at least 25 years after it would have been there. But there it was laying on the duff. This shouldn't be here, but it was. So anyway.
Well, this has really been a very special evening. It's a evening that connects us by space and time. Right, we're talking about an event that happened 50 years ago. We've got friends Gary Shea and Greg Olson who worked together at Lake McDonald Lodge 50 years ago. We have people from Whitefish and Big Fork in Ohio and Missouri and North Carolina and Connecticut who all have a passion for this place and the history of it, and our ability to come together to share time is really valuable. And I just need to always say thank you to each of you who are also contributors to the work that we are privileged to be able to do, because without you, we can't help the park preserve this place for future generations. So Terry Kennedy, thank you for taking time out of your skateboarding, wealthy spy, poetry writing to be with us tonight. We look forward to seeing you on a peak soon. For the rest of you, thanks again for joining us, and we'll look forward to getting together and sharing more stories very, very soon.
And people that didn't get to ask their questions can email me at montcleveland5@gmail.com. Mount Cleveland run together, the numeral 5@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to write you an email back. It'd be great.
And email Sean SEAN@glacier.org to get a book plate. And
yes,
all of us, if you ever want any of us at Glacier Conservancy, all you got to remember is Glacier and then .org and then somebody's first name, and it'll get to us. So
Look for the new addition to the book. It should be out by the end of the month or early October. It's too bad I didn't make it for this, but it'll be something to look forward to.
Yeah, it's a
we'll
good
be
Christmas-
sure to make a little announcement too, like on our socials when it comes in too.
Oh, that'd be
cool.
great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great Christmas item available on glacier.org. We're happy to ship it anywhere. So,
Yeah.
Great.
well, thanks everybody. Really appreciate your continued steadfast visionary support. It means so much to so many. Thanks again and good night.
Thanks, everybody. I really appreciate it. It's been great fun for me.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Terry.
so much.
Right.
Thanks so much, Terry. Such a treat.
Okay. Thanks, Jill.
A great
All
seeing
right.
all
Thanks,
of you.
Greg.
Gary.
John.
All right.
Thanks,
Bye,
Terry.
everyone.
Good night.
Bye.
Super fun.